Hello, and welcome to Dig It. I'm Peter Brown, and hosting the show with me today is Chris Day. Hi, Chris.
Hi, Peter.
So, January in the garden. Back again, Chris.
Indeed.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to you and to all our podcast listeners on Dig It.
Definitely. Happy New Year, everyone. And in the news this week, what have we got? Or rather, in the news in the last couple of weeks over
Indeed,
Christmas and building up to now, isn't it?
Yeah, there's lots of sort of talk in the garden trade, which obviously I'm sure many of our listeners might be interested in, because obviously there's some sort of movers and shakers.
Definitely. An old classic fertiliser product, isn't there?
There is. Yes, one which I'm sure
everyone knows.
Oh, yeah. And if we say the name Baby Bio, what does that evoke?
Houseplants.
Houseplants, a little nicely shaped bottle, symbolic of over 70 years.
Is it really that long?
Yes.
I know the glass bottles I can remember from my childhood, and sort of the issue was always dropping them on the floor, because we worked in the houseplant room and used it as a fertiliser, and obviously had a nice concrete floor, and you only had to knock them over and smash it. They went everywhere.
Yeah. Oh dear, that's not a good way to start.
But they're not glass anymore, are they?
No, I suspect they're hopefully a recycled plastic, but they're certainly a lot more handleable than they used to be. And of course, and it's the standard high nitrogen feed for our houseplants, which of course we've got come to love. And after our last chat on Dig It with Jane Peroni, we know all about the fact that Baby Bio is up there as the best houseplant feed for your foliage plants, certainly.
Most definitely, and most well known. And obviously nitrogen is good for the green and the sort of lush leaf growth, isn't it?
I suppose leaf and structure, shall we say, stems and such like that.
That's it. Yeah. So if you want your green-leaved plants to look extra green, give them some Baby Bio.
But it's had a bit of a makeover, Peter, as Baby Bio.
Oh, yeah?
It's gone very green. In fact, it's gone very organic.
Brilliant.
So we've moved away from the traditional formulation, and of course it's our good old friend seaweed is now taking center stage.
Seaweed's going into it as well. Brilliant.
So it's such a good. So it contains natural seaweed infused with a plant feed containing all the three nutrients, which is of course NPK, which is of nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. So you're getting a more balanced growth, which is probably going to be good for a lot more houseplants.
Oh, so it's not so focused on nitrogen anymore?
No, the ratio is 3 to 5. So actually it's just a little bit higher on the potassium now. So they have changed.
So that's going to be better for flowering, isn't it?
Yes, but it's still quite high but it's moving more to your flowering plants, but it will still keep your green plants looking nice and bonny on the windowsill.
Keep them growing. Yeah,
indeed. And of course, because it's got all those other materials in there, obviously nitrogen itself will help, obviously, for healthy. Remember, it's all about health as well as growth. You get that balance. And of course, as we know, seaweed food is just so good at stimulating growth. So certainly as we're in the month of January, towards the end of this month into February, as the light increases in our homes, then we might start to think about giving our houseplants the first feed.
Food again. Excellent. That's a good idea. And what else have we got? We've got Nick Marshall. Now, Nick Marshall was, if I remember correctly, he was in Wyvale, wasn't he? And then he moved to Dobbies. He was a CEO or head man, I think I'll say. I don't know if it's proper title, but he's now the Country Home Group.
Yes.
They've opened their first new site called Lavershot Barns.
That's it, yes.
Down in sunny Surrey, isn't it?
Indeed, yes. And it's obviously a complete sort of change of direction in the fact that a lot of these lovely sort of stately homes obviously require plant centres.
So that's the way his company's going, is it? That they're going to be in all of the National Trust properties or
more sort of private homes, I think, yes.
Okay,
yeah,
right.
I think that's the thing, I think, because obviously we're all familiar with, when we go to a National Trust property, there is usually a little plant area, isn't there, and obviously a gift shop. I always think, personally, Peter, it's always a missed opportunity. They're always not particularly, a bit dowdy and a bit boring.
They can be, The tea rooms are often quite nice.
Oh, yes,
and, the actual
side,
sort of retail side of it's often a bit lacking.
Yeah.
So that he's going to capitalise on that then, is he?
He is, yes. And I think that's a good growth area. And I think if he puts, obviously, his wonderful expertise, which obviously he's acquired over the years, into something like that, hopefully we'll see some really impressive little plant centres being perhaps a bit more dynamic to perhaps how we usually perceive them.
Okay, yeah, because a little bit of research I did on Lavashot, it was sort of touting itself as the greatest new eatery in Surrey, or let me find a quote for you. It is the new luxury lifestyle destination and claims to have the most unique dining experience in Surrey currently.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So,
yeah.
I find it very interesting that garden centres and plant nurseries now seem to predominantly feature catering and food shops.
Yes. Is this whole idea of being a destination garden centre, I wonder? Or is it something a little bit more intrinsic to the fact that we enjoy our food and perhaps going to a one-stop emporium for food? I wonder, but it's
very interesting, isn't it? Because I mean, Dobby's over in Fenny Stratford, just down the road from us. I'm going to say, I don't know what, 40% of their shop floor is now Sainsbury's.
Yes.
And the same I went to one up in Warwick when I was up in that part of the country. And again, they had this Sainsbury's supermarket in a garden centre.
Indeed, yes.
I was just like, well, a local food shop or a local butcher, totally understand. That's sort of well within sort of the idea of local and growing and keeping everything sort of low food miles. But our high street supermarkets...
The right place in a garden centre? I think that's the question, isn't it?
Yeah, it's very interesting, isn't it?
Yeah, I feel a bit uncomfortable. I mean, certainly in this area, North Buckinghamshire, we've got World's End Garden Centre, which many people will know was at its time, and obviously that used to be a Wyvale Garden Centre before Dobby's. I walked around there the other week, and of course they've given over a large area. It seems a vast area to Sainsbury's, so it just seems slightly out of kilter to what you remember. But of course things move on, and I suppose
they do. And I suppose, I mean, ultimately Tesco's owned Dobby's.
They did. Yes.
I don't think that's the official term, is it? But from your and I point of view, the same people who ran Tesco's.
Indeed. There was a connection there, wasn't
there? I think there's another group, the Rosebourne Garden Centre. I mean, they don't even call themselves a garden centre. I mean, they just call themselves Rosebourne, and that's a concept that was, I think, bought out by, I'm going to say, Beckworth Emporium and John Kitchen and David Brown, who are, again, are they ex-Wyvale?
I think Mr. Kitchen definitely is a Wyvale person. Yes,
I mean, they go round there shop, and there is a plant section. It's a very nice plant section. There's also a fabulous sort of vegetable and fruit section, and butcher and a massive table service restaurant. And I just wonder how long we'll be able to call these places garden centres, and is that the way forwards for the garden centre? I
mean, I know a lot of big garden centres. I'm thinking of some of the ones certainly up in the northwest. I managed to go to Bent's Garden Centre back in October last year.
Yep.
And they promote themselves as a home and garden centre. So they put the word home in there because obviously they do whole furnishings, but also they do an amazing amount of food, and obviously have a number of restaurants. And
a cinema, and
when you go to Barton Grange, you've got
that's Barton Grange, isn't it? But Barton Grange, I mean, that's another
big,
very, very, very big garden centre. It's definitely a destination. I mean, you look at the number of bus parking spaces they've got there, and it's lovely. I mean, their cinema's got a green roof, and from an ecological point of view, you think, well, that's really the way forwards for modern buildings. Huge solar panels. And
don't you think, Peter, it's quite good that we're getting this diversion of different sort of talents of garden centre, proprietors wanting to make a statement with their garden centres?
Definitely.
Yeah, because I think about Barton Grange. When I was at college, the original Barton Grange on the A6, which was part of the hotel when Eddie Topping started up. It was a very traditional, incredibly 1960s, 1970s. Then you look at what Guy Topping, his son, has done now. It couldn't be any different, but still feels incredibly homely. It's not lost its sense of purpose. And I think that's the thing. It's getting that balance, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. And ultimately, one of the joys of being in retail is we aren't, if we stay the same, we just go backwards. We have to evolve, and the market has to change.
And I'm sure customers and gardeners are, well, that's a changing market as well, isn't it? Just think how things have moved, in the last 5 years with, say, houseplants, how we're looking at how we're growing our grow your own.
Yep.
The marketplace is ever evolving, and that's surely a really good testament to what we want as customers.
Well, definitely, because just thinking about the raised garden, I mean, I'm going to say 10, 15 years ago, these wooden plant benches came out for the retail market.
Yep.
And we all looked at them and were like, £100 for that funny little bench? What's the purpose of that? And those products are now so popular.
Yeah.
And you can understand why. I mean, the modern house has a relatively small space outside, and quite often maybe 50% of it will be put down to, say, patio, because we all love sitting out in the sun and enjoying the outside space. And to dedicate lots of room to a vegetable garden just isn't practical these days. So if you can put it into a raised bed and then move it around, so potentially, if you haven't got sun in all of the garden, you can bring it out into the centre of the patio when you're not using it for entertaining, and move it to the one side when you are. It's brilliant, isn't it? And
absolutely.
you grow some lettuce, and not quite the same as having a whole allotment.
No, but it's next best thing, isn't it? And that's
thing.
really interesting, Peter, because there's a new study has found that having a garden big enough to have a small vegetable patch or some raised beds is high on the list, or a greenhouse, by the way, is high on the list of the must-haves for new homeowners. The first thing, by the way, is an ensuite bathroom, but the second...
Yeah, I can understand.
That's quite important. But the second thing is a garden, a bigger garden. So that does beg the question with our building developers now, are they going to give more space over to gardens?
I guess the thing is how deep are your pockets? Land is expensive, isn't it now? I think in the paper yesterday I read 2.5 acres of land in central London had just been sold for £80 million an acre.
Gosh, yes.
It's an old eye hospital that's, I don't know what it's going to be turned into, probably a massive, great multi-storey building of some sort. But you think £80 million an acre. You've got to get a lot of people in it to use that to make it pay for itself. But fundamentally, our gardens have been shrinking over the last 30 years. Yeah. And modern house builders hopefully might take that into consideration and build a little less houses and a little more garden.
Interestingly, exactly, Peter, 29% wanted their new home to be close to a park or an outdoor space. Now, in view of the pandemic and the fact that we're obviously having to look at our outdoor space even more so, that's an even more important consideration. So obviously this research has shown quite a notable admission that we do hanker for nature.
It's really nice, and to be fair to modern house builders, you see all these big estates going up, and they do actually put. I know it's a requirement of planning to build public spaces into them, but the new play parks do get built, and it is nice to be able to go to the park. And fundamentally, if you're living in a flat, those probably are the sort of places you're going to go and use. So that's why they're so popular.
Indeed. Well, hopefully the selling point will be the slightly larger gardens, or like they do in the Netherlands when they build up a new estate, they build in an area for community allotments. That's been in the 1980s and the 90s, and I think they're still continuing it today. So they actually build in an area for not necessarily a home farm, but they give you space so you can do productivity. I mean, you would expect nothing else from the Dutch to do that, but what an initiative.
Yeah, because I've read some articles recently about community gardens. They're not quite allotments, but they are spaces where communities can go. And certainly our interview with Mike and his community orchards. I mean, that's all come about through getting private space and turning it with some funding into public space, and then people get to use the space for.
And isn't that good news? I mean, that's good news for people to to share their interest in gardening. And certainly Gardeners World over the last year through 2021 has shown lots of examples where communities do get together and they make quite a big difference. So more power to their elbow.
That's it.
Okay, and also on the what's going on in January, between the 5th of January and the 21st of February, we've got the Big Schools Birdwatch.
Yep.
So basically, we're all familiar with the normal birdwatch, which a lot of us get involved in. I certainly try to if I can. This is aimed obviously for school children, And like the one we do a little bit later on in the winter, early spring, it only takes an hour of your time. So it's a good opportunity to do a bit of bird watching, to have a look at the different species, maybe to set up a nice bird feeding area, look at all those necessary, fat balls and suet and all the other bits of ingredients you need to put into encouraging those birds to settle in the school, and you can then do a bit more counting. So I think it's a really good initiative to get the school teachers to be involved in.
Definitely, and I know when I was down the allotment the other day, I think I spotted the first buzzard flying over sort of central Northampton. So I was a bit taken aback, and I've seen it a couple of times since. So it's definitely a big buzzard has finally moved into Northampton. But
that's great.
Certainly, I know in this area, I'd say over the last 4 or 5 years, they've become more and more sort of prevalent, and I do hope that they're. Well, I don't know if I should even say this, but feeding on the squirrels, because I leaked.
Oh dear,
it might be a bit controversial for some of our listeners who apparently there's a Squirrel Appreciation Day.
There is, yes,
isn't there in January?
There is indeed, yes. If you want to make a note of the date, so perhaps avoid it. It's the 21st of January, which is. Yes, appreciate them in what you can, but as far as gardeners, they can cause a lot of problems.
They're very beautiful. I don't take their beauty away from them. I mean, certainly the red squirrel. If you ever get the joy of seeing one of those with their little tufty red ears, and
beautiful.
So it's a bit smaller, but they certainly are a real sight to behold. And then obviously the Duke of Bedford's grey squirrels that he intrduced a few years ago, that have taken over the country and dig holes and, like you say, eat all the bird food. But anyway, that you either love them or you hate them.
You do. Unfortunately, Peter, we've got all these wonderful squirrel-proof peanuts and seed and fat ball feeders available now, and suet feeders, so you can buy something which does look a little bit like an iron cage around the food, but at least it keeps the squirrels at bay.
They're not too bad. I mean, I can't remember the make of the one I've got, but I think it's brilliant because it's basically a standard bird feeder, and when the squirrel jumps on it, it has a spring inside it, so the whole thing drops down and shuts off all the doors to the food. So the squirrel looks at it and he's like,
I'll go elsewhere now.
Off he goes to my neighbour's bird feeder and feeds on that one. But they are good. Yeah,
indeed. And it's just one of those things we just have to accept. But many years ago, when I used to live up north, Formby in Lancashire, if you get a chance to go to the wonderful woods there, which I think is National Trust. There's red squirrels there, and that's what I saw when I was a youngster. I haven't seen any since, but they are a beautiful creature.
Yeah, because I thought, is it Isle of Wight? There's still some, and up in Scotland, I know there's obviously still some areas in the country that haven't been taken over by the grey squirrel, but they're not as common as they once were.
No, indeed, not. No, indeed. Also, in January, between the 10th and the 16th, it's Houseplant Week UK 2020. So it's another time to celebrate those wonderful houseplants, Peter.
Yeah, definitely. And we had a very good interview with Jane Perrone, didn't we?
We did.
That was last episode, I think.
It was, yes.
And there's a fantastic competition that you can still enter, still ongoing.
Yep. Yeah, got to the end of the month, end of January to enter. So pop over to our podcast page at www.buckinghamgardencentre.co.uk. Follow the links to the podcast and you'll be able to enter the competition there.
Yeah, because that's for a signed David Dominy book. There's 2 copies available, so do get your entries in, and hopefully you'll be a winner.
Indeed, yeah. And if you haven't listened to Jane's chat about houseplants, strongly recommend it. It's a really good listen.
Definitely, and some really good points on how to care for the houseplants as well.
Especially in January when, our focus, the poinsettia finally perhaps drops its last bract. Well, hopefully not, but then obviously we've got to start thinking about obviously spring and houseplants, and not a lot of people will be bringing in their bulbs at this time of the year as well. A lot of their prepared hyacinths and narcissi, a lot of people hold them back. They don't bring them out for Christmas because obviously when the decorations come down on the 4th or the 5th of January, then of course you want some colour, don't you?
Yeah, and the hyacinths, I always love the smell they create there. Right. Get rid of the smell of Christmas trees and bring out the hyacinths.
Yes, and the other good area as well is, of course, you've had this Christmas tree in your lounge or your dining room. What do you fill that space with? Of course, it's a good opportunity sometimes to buy a bigger houseplant a lot of garden centres, including Buckingham, we tend to get in some nice specimen plants to do just that job. So to keep the greenery going without the baubles, then maybe a large Ficus benjamina or maybe a Swiss cheese plant or something, just to give you that green look.
Yeah, that's a good idea, Chris. I never really thought about that. It's in my sort of front room where the Christmas tree lives. It's a north-facing room, and it does have a big bay window, but where the Christmas tree is, it's to the left of the bay window, so it doesn't actually get any direct light at all.
Right.
What can you think that would do well?
The rule is the bigger the leaf of the houseplant, the less light they need. So Swiss cheese plants or your philodendrons, anything with big foliage. Obviously, a lot of your palms as well would be good there. Just avoid the small leaf plants like the weeping fig, because that needs more light.
And what about a chamidoria?
That's it, chamidoria.
Okay.
Palms.
They're the lovely palms, aren't they?
Fantastic, yes.
Yeah. Would that tolerate sort of fairly low light levels?
Would indeed, yes. Yeah, just if you're bringing palms into a room where the light levels are low, just be careful on the watering. Keep them on a much drier regime.
Okay.
So that's quite important with palms. They just don't like to be too wet.
And can I treat them like I do my orchids, sort of I guess if it doesn't need that much water, every couple of weeks, sort of give it a bit of a dunk in a bucket of water and then take it out?
Possibly,
and then let it dry out? Is that a good way, or are you more sort of get the watering can and give it a sprinkle from the top? And
a little bit from the top, and just do a little bit of testing with your finger just to see how the compost is. Because, of course, once we get into this time of the year, light levels are increasing. We've gone past the shortest day now.
Yep.
And light levels are going to, 2 or 3 minutes a day, and light levels improve. So that should be a good omen if you're trying to obviously get plants to get used to those lower light conditions. So
rather than wait till the middle of summer, put them in now.
Yes, and get them used to and acclimatised. Sometimes, that same advice can be reversed through the summer if you're bringing something really exotic, like a small leaf little Ficus benjamino, especially ones with the variegated leaves.
Yeah.
Sometimes bringing those during the summer is a good way because, of course, they're more difficult to acclimatise. So, you're capitalising on the fact that the light levels at that time of year are at the absolute maximum, and the plants should hopefully enjoy those conditions and settle down before the winter.
That's a good idea. Thanks for that tip, Chris.
Okay. The way we use our gardens has changed significantly over the past 20 years or so, and so have the wonderful structures which have been available to us. The change to purpose-built garden structures has been a major success story, and the fact that we're recording our podcast in this wonderful breeze house is a clear indication that garden buildings have moved on from a humble potting shed. There's so much more to garden buildings these days, and as home working continues to gain momentum, perhaps it's time we took stock of this exciting marketplace. So we're delighted to be joined on Dig It podcast today with Andrew Peck, Managing Director of Malvern Garden Buildings. So Andrew, welcome to Dig It.
Thank you very much.
So let's sort of set the scene of the garden building business. I suppose it's not all about sort of 6x4 garden sheds or log cabins anymore. And I suppose the question is, what was the log cabin the start of the big garden building trend in the 1980s, or was it the garden room sheds of the 1970s?
Yeah, over time there has been quite a development. I think the original properties with greenhouses are over 100 years old, and then I suppose the classic summer house, they always used to be on a turntable, so you could turn them so that the doors are always facing the sun. And then the garden shed, of course, and that I suppose those three concepts were the basis, but it has evolved a lot since then. The classic garden shed sort of got bigger and bigger and started to become little home offices and hobby rooms. Obviously, greenhouses still very much with us today. If anything, a resurgence as sort of the grow from home industry, improves. People more and more aware of eating healthily and whatever. But no, the whole sector has certainly seen huge change and huge growth with work from home and leisure, more leisure from home. To be honest, people looking at their home space and wanting to make the most of their gardens. We're famous for that in the UK. Everyone's got barbecues and garden furniture and buildings. We love it when the sun comes out and to get out there and have some fun.
Yeah, we certainly do. And so really over the last 20 years, those have been the major changes then, sort of moving more into the leisure market and maybe just reinventing the other sort of products like the greenhouse and the shed to make them a little bit more dynamic maybe?
Yeah, of course they improve and grow in design and standard. But the concept remains the same: a basic shed, an area to store stuff, and often a place of great solace for usually the man of the household. Without meaning to sound sexist,
Yeah.
it's often a special little place. You'll find a little fridge in the corner with a few bottles of beer, and then in the old days there used to maybe be an ashtray tucked away. I think they're mainly gone now, but no, everyone still needs a garden shed. But in terms of the use of the garden as a real extension to a property now, I think that's probably the major change that we've seen. That moving house is hugely expensive. Extending your property is also quite an expensive thing to do, and often planning permissions involved, etc. Where most garden buildings of reasonable size, they still come in under sort of temporary, classed as a temporary structure, so you can crack on and provide extra usable space, whether that be for leisure or working or hobby or whatever in the garden. So it's becomes a really positive and sort of simple route forward to extend your space at home.
Yeah, indeed. I mean, even the potting bench has sort of evolved. What trends in outdoor buildings have you seen in recent times? Is there anything definitely sort of captured the marketplace in at Malvern Garden Buildings?
Well, I mean, recent times being pandemic times, the work from home was always a growing area anyway, and that's just absolutely taken off with the start of this pandemic. And I think we've all seen a change to how we're going to live our lives. Those who used to be in the office 5 days a week, I think the sort of average now is, and going forward, will be 50-50, maybe 2 or 3 days in a week and 2 or 3 days from home. So to have a dedicated workspace at home has become a real plus for a lot of people. And I hate to say it, maybe even for the hospitality industry, they've been under huge pressure and sadly are again this Christmas, but and huge sympathies to them. But a lot of people on the leisure side, and certainly with the Breeze House side, as a sort of open-sided structure, with dining table and seating and whatever, so you can sit at home and enjoy the outdoor space with some shelter from the elements, and heaters usually sold in them as well, so you can even add some warmth. And there's a lot more people, I think, socializing more at home and feeling maybe safer, using their space at home. So that's been a huge growth sector as well.
Indeed. I mean, I would say we're recording in a lovely Breeze House today.
Yeah, it's a really fantastic building. I mean, like you say, it's a dining room that I'd be proud to have in my house on one side, and then a lovely sofa on the other, and like you say, a good fridge in the corner, ready to serve the champagne
indeed.
from.
In fact, the building you're in, that's called the Oval Cape. So it's one of our larger ones, and we've actually installed 2 this week, including one today that's just been finished off. These are people who want to have their Christmas lunches out in the garden, and they're having family round, and the idea of having a bit of free air movement, but being in a lovely entertaining space. They say they can provide the heaters and keep the wine chilled in the fridge. Just ticks a huge box. And as you can see, it's a fun space to be in, isn't it?
Oh,
you're
definitely
going to enjoy spending an afternoon, evening out there.
Without a doubt, it's fantastic. And I guess a lot of other people maybe put jacuzzis and things like that in these type of buildings, do they? Or maybe turn them into gyms?
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, the options are pretty much endless. There's certainly been a growth in bars outside. So we've built a fair few bars this year to go in buildings.
Yep.
People sort of see the outdoor sort of pub idea working. And I mean, the hot tub sector has been very, very busy, huge demand there, again, for all the reasons. So we've often put those within structures as well, as people want a bit of a cover over them so they can make more use of them through the 12 months of the year. So, that's quite an area for us.
Yeah, because thinking about bars and discos, you had a great success at Chelsea this year, didn't you, Andrew? Can you tell us a bit about that building? Yeah,
sure. Well, we did. So Chelsea, we work in an area in Ranelagh Gardens that's called the Plateau, and we provide buildings in there. And in the past, it's been for sort of artisan, small businesses, artisaners who are trying to make a go. Maybe they make homemade jewelry or sculptures or furniture or something. Now, they can't really afford to exhibit at Chelsea. So these buildings were given to them free of charge, and they could sort of show their wares and demonstrate to people what they did. And it was an area of huge interest. But last year, they decided they'd like to focus on houseplants. as being a big growth sector in the garden sector. So various companies were invited, and including because we provide the buildings. One of them is sort of for us. So we joined up with a local firm. They suggested taking our building and actually suspending it as if it was in a hanging basket within a house.
Okay.
So we created a huge net and put the thing on a sort of raised platform with mirrors around, so it looked as though it was suspended. And then, completely kitted out the inside with planting, and brought in the disco and a bit of fun element to attract some attention, and some dancing girls, and so really went to town with sort of launching the area. And for the first time ever, that area was judged by the RHS, and we won a gold medal.
Well done.
Which we were just thrilled with, because those are pretty rare things to come by. So we were absolutely delighted, and it was a lot of fun doing it as well.
Brilliant. Well, congratulations. It was certainly a spectacle to behold, wasn't it? It's really good.
No, well, thank you very much. Yeah.
I was going to say, very non-RHS as well, Andrew. So well done for being quite brave in your decisions there. Great stuff. I was going to say, as well as obviously the RHS flower show, obviously you're quite actively involved in ITV's Love Your Garden, I believe. Yeah, no, we get some requests from various areas to help out on programming, and often with great stories where they're transforming people's gardens. So someone's doing a particularly good job, and we always help out where we can. So we have done a few of those, providing buildings when they're doing a makeover for somebody very very worthy, of which there's thousands of people. There's so many good people in the country who do great things. You can't help them all, but we always try our best, and so whenever possible, help out where we can. That's good. Yeah. Andrew, I'm a great houseplant fan, as Peter knows. I keep going on about the way houseplants and greenhouses especially now allow us to grow more. I had a greenhouse since the age of 10. My current one is a Malvern Retreat greenhouse, which I think is one of yours from a few years ago, with a little potting shed, which I have to say hasn't got any alcohol in it, but it has got quite a lot of paraffin at the moment. Ready for the
hopefully no ashtrays either, Chris.
Well, hopefully not. No. I was going to say, what sort of changes have you seen in the whole area of buying greenhouses? You were saying earlier about perhaps the newbies coming on board with the vegetable gardens, but any thoughts on the way greenhouse sales might go in the future? Yeah, it's an area to develop. It's it's the whole growing from home thing. People want them to grow vegetables, so they want them as opposed to having sort of pretty spaces or areas. Maybe I think in the past they've used them a bit of a stroke summer house or just nice indoor plants. We're finding that the big people or the big increased level of demand is for those who really want to grow from home, and so. Although often still lovely structures and some quite nice big greenhouses going out there, it's the more practical side of them that seems to have had the real resurgence. And I guess for the obvious reasons, really, about being health conscious as everyone's becoming more and more aware of what they eat, where it comes from. And there is nothing better than it might be a very expensive carrot that you pull from your own allotment. And if you look at the fertilizers and times you put into it, it probably costs a couple of pounds each, but nothing tastes quite as good as stuff grown at home. Absolutely. So, yeah, I totally agree with that. That's the thing. So, Andrew, thinking about ahead now, where do you think sort of garden buildings are likely to go in the future? I'm thinking here about sustainability, as that's the big sort of wish word at the moment, isn't it? And sort of ongoing uses of our buildings in our gardens. Yeah, well, I think I feel quite confident that garden buildings as a sector, remains in a pretty healthy position. As I say, the prices of property is so high, but gardens have certainly come back into a level of real interest for people having that outdoor space. So if you are asked to stay at home, then you've got a space you can really enjoy. So I think the working from home is undoubtedly here to stay. That's just going to become a way of life for us all going forward, and you can only see that increasing. And there's only so long you want to use the back bedroom or the dining room as an office, really. Ultimately, it's great to have an outdoor space, even from the discipline point of view of at the end of the day, you can lock up the door and go inside and enjoy your home and time with your family.
relax as everybody needs to do, and then you have a separate place to work. So that's going to carry on being a strong sector. And the leisure side of things, our leisure time is just going to become more and more important to us. So I can see people, wanting to maximize that outdoor space and maximize the time they can spend out there with family and friends again. So, no, I think it's in a pretty solid place.
Good. And what about the sort of sustainability sort of area, of actually the materials we're using for a lot of our buildings these days? Obviously, that must be coming under a lot of scrutiny now with developing designs for your buildings.
No, it is. But to be honest, the timbers that we've used, we're members of the FSC, which is the Forestry Stewardship Council. So we only buy woods where they've got a policy of where trees are cut down, they're planting at an increased rate. So usually sort of 1.5 times what they take down, they're replanting. So it's quite well monitored. And as a sector, it's important that we maintain doing that. And I guess with the modern treatments and maintenance recommendations and whatever as well, you can get longer and longer life out of these buildings with a little bit of maintenance, and they come from real sustainable sources. And been doing that for a number of years already. And you're right, that's an area that just continues to grow in importance. But we feel well covered there.
Oh, that's good to hear. And we usually ask a couple of our final questions to our guests. If you're ever stranded on a desert island, which of your lovely buildings perhaps would you like to be stranded with?
Oh, well, that's a pretty simple one. That for me is the breeze house. This desert island, I'm imagining that
it's going to be warm,
lovely blue water and nice warm temperatures. So where a breeze house might shelter us from the rain, sadly more than the sun in the UK on occasions, that little sheltered space where I can sit and listen to the waves crashing in on the beach would definitely put me in a nice breeze house.
Perfect. And finally, do you have any sort of outdoor gardening building, greenhouse or shed-related jokes or stories you'd perhaps like to share with us, anecdotally?
I don't know if I do. I mean, I know one of the most popular of the buildings is what we call it the old man's shed, and so when we have a display buildings and we have displays as we do at Buckingham Garden Centre, and we have a number of those around the country. And our old man's shed is always done out with a comfy chair in the corner and an old radio and a bottle of wine. And all I would say is that everyone who walks around the sites and looks at those, especially the chaps, they all walk in there and go, "Oh, this is for me. This is for me."
Oh, yeah, so it's obviously well dressed and obviously signposts a perfect escape for somebody. Oh, that's really great.
Oh, it's that recognition, I think, for the chap of a space all of his own.
Yeah.
And generally that tends to be the garden shed.
It definitely does. And long may it continue, Andrew. Thank you.
Indeed, I agree.
Yeah, thank you very much for your time today. It's been great.
Not at all. Pleasure speaking to you, chaps. All the best.
Yes, thanks, Andrew.
Thanks, Andrew.
Thank you. Yep.
Okay, so Chris, what jobs have you got for me to do this month in my garden?
Yeah, well, turn of the year, it's a time to give your fruit trees a bit of a clean up. Traditionally, of course, we used to use a product called Morteg, which was based on tar acids, things like what the old formulation Jace fluid used to contain. They've all obviously gone now, where they've all been banned. So we've got to use basically things like Vitax winter tree wash, which is based on an organic product.
Okay.
Nothing wrong with it. Works really well. And obviously you spray it and you basically treat all the nooks and crannies of your fruit trees, especially your older fruit trees, where you might have overwintering larvae and eggs, which could obviously impact on your crop this year. So it's
okay. So the idea is sort of knock all the pesties off now, and then hopefully it'll give you a better crop next year.
Yes, yeah. I mean, what I always do, my fruit trees, I do every other year, because I think that the trouble is you don't want to be killing any goodies as well as the baddies here.
Yep.
So I usually do it every couple of years, and it's due this year, so that's going to keep me going in the next few weeks.
And that's more for bugs rather than sort of bacterial. So things like my peach leaf curl, it's not going to do anything like that on my cherry trees. Or
it doesn't. If you're mixing some product up, and you've got a mixture of fruit trees, it doesn't really matter. You can use it on all of them really, because you will reduce that. And in some instances, you'll probably get rid of some of the green on your stems as well. But some of that is obviously beneficial. Obviously, the north-facing part of your tree is often green because, of course, it's not getting the light, and it's a natural thing anyway. So. But I think the most important thing is, these organic pesticides now, they work on the waxy compounds over the pest, so they actually infiltrate through breaking down that waxy exterior, and obviously kill the pest that way. So it's a kind of a good way of giving your plants a good clean. But remember, you can only apply this when the plants are dormant. So you've got to the end of February. So if you don't do it this month, you've got next month as well.
I'm just thinking about cleaning. I know patio slabs. My mother's very, very lucky. She's got some Yorkshire flagstones. They're beautiful, but they do get the algae growing on them in her garden. There's a couple of products that I've recommended to her that I think she's had a lot of success with, and so simple to use. I mean, one option you've got is obviously a Karcher pressure washer with one of those round, I don't know, I always think they're like hovercrafts. They're like a spinning sort of, they fly around. They're really good. They do get rid of the algae and they bring the colour right back up. But something that we found is a lot easier to use is just Algon or Patio Magic are two products that I think we sell in the garden centre as well, that you just mix them up in a watering can, sprinkle them on, get a stiff brush a few minutes a bit later, and give it a good sort of brushing down, and does the same thing as the patio jet washer, and gets rid of the slippy algae, because they are so. And
I think we've been we've been quite fortunate this winter so far. It's been quite dry, isn't it, compared to other winters when we've had a lot of excessive waste. But of course, it's those areas on your patio and your deck, certainly on my garden, where it doesn't get a lot of sun anyway. So of course, those areas are even more prone. And of course, it's a slip hazard, isn't it? It's dangerous.
Well, that's it. I mean, that's why we started using the Algon, because my mother slipped over and broke her wrist, unfortunately. So it is definitely worth doing, and it saves you going slipping and sliding.
Most definitely.
And then we've got obviously bird feeding time of year, isn't it?
It is. Yes, we're going to keep the birds feed. I was topping up my peanuts and my sunflowers yesterday, actually, sunflower seeds. And of course, obviously for your robins, as we're in that time of the year when robins tend to be quite territorial, make sure there's a bit of mealworm down for them as well. They love a bit of mealworm.
Yeah, they like mealworm and fat balls as well.
Yes,
but I remember I did an interesting experiment a year or two ago with fat balls, because I think we had some new supplies in, and I found it really interesting that I think we had 3 different types of fat ball, and I put them all out and tried them just to see which ones would get eaten. And the birds are fussy. They really are. They left one make, totally wouldn't eat it. And I was like, well, it's a fat ball. It's full of nice looking seed to me, but apparently, no, not the right fat or something to the birds. But they do have taste, and they prefer certain ones that I don't know which the best make is. Maybe some of our listeners could comment on that, whether they've had the same experience. And if there are any better brands out there that you think that we should all be stocking, let us know.
Yeah, most definitely. But it is a matter of keeping them topped up, isn't it? And obviously made sure, like I did yesterday, 2 of my bird feeders were given a good clean too, because they do get a bit mucky over the course of the winter as well. So, just a general bit of housekeeping to keep your birds nicely fed.
That's it, and it's good time still to plant a hedge, isn't it? If you're still thinking of ornamental tree or an ornamental hedge or a nice...
That's it, yeah. The season, as we know, in the gardening world has been a bit difficult. It was a very late season for getting stock in, but we're at the point now at the garden centre we've got a good range of native species in. Perhaps not the full range of certain things, because obviously a few things are in short supply. However, there's the usual suspects: your blackthorn, your quickthorn, your obviously all your dog roses and hazel and such like, which will give you a really good feather. Our feather threads will love it in the years to come, because obviously may even use it as a nesting spot as well.
Yeah, because like you say, very, very late season this year, and we've only had I'm just trying to think. I'm going to say 3-4 mornings where I've had to actually clean the frost off the car in the morning. So certainly doesn't seem as cold as historically it has been. And you just think, well, autumn didn't happen until really, really late, which is why the bare root season is just so late. But I wonder whether things will start growing and it'll be a warm spring, or whether it'll just be a very, very late spring and we'll have sort of snows in March and I'll be able to go sledging for my birthday.
Not good. But I mean, if you can get your plants in as soon as you can, I mean, that's our advice to all our customers at the moment. Try and plan. If you know you're going to need stock, certainly, like a lot of companies are under pressure to get stock out, and it's quite important with certain things that you don't want to run short. And in this instance, you can prepare nice and early and get your soil prepared in good time. If the soil is still quite dry, which, as I say,
it's been quite dry recently, hasn't it?
Yeah,
and, not much. So if you want to dig a hole and get something the earth prepared, ready for the bare root to arrive, it's a jolly good time to do it.
And in a way, Peter, that's the most difficult part, isn't it? Getting your soil, but the planting actually is quite enjoyable. Well, it should be
if you've done the preparation.
Indeed, and you haven't got hundreds to plant if it's just a reasonable number. But I mean, people often say, how long does it take? I mean, I always say, well, get your preparation done, and then the planting should, allow a good morning to do your planting, and you can do it leisurely. And remember, in gardening, work with the weather. No one wants to plant a hedge or prepare the soil when it's pouring down with rain. So choose your times well.
That's it, because there's nothing worse when you're out there on your allotment or in the garden in your welly boots and it's raining and the ground's sticking to your wellies. It's hard work, isn't it?
It is, yeah. So make life easy for yourself, and just watch the weather forecast and being gardeners in January, plan ahead.
That's it. And like you say, unfortunately, the Dutch obviously had the floods back last year, and obviously that had a massive impact on all the bulbs, which we're no doubt going to see in a few weeks' time when the spring bulbs come in, and also the hedging plants that would normally have the varieties have just not been available, have they?
No, and ornamental trees as well. A lot of the the flowering cherries, some of the most popular things, the whole crops have been destroyed by flood damage. So yes, you just be a bit patient.
2-3 years before they come back online, isn't it?
It is.
Fundamentally, they don't. You can't just turn them on and off.
You can't.
They take
not a ten of beans, unfortunately. And also, I think it's a good opportunity if that happens to have a look at other species. Sometimes, by default, you could grow something really nice. There's some really nice trees out there. So, sorbus. There's lots of other wonderful genera of trees to grow, and sometimes it's a needs must situation, and usually with a good result at the end.
That's it. And coming up in a couple of weeks' time, we've got an interesting interview planned, haven't we, Chris?
We have. We're
Katrina going to Fenton from
the Heritage Seed Library of Garden Organics.
Excellent. So she's going to be telling us all about seeds and how to grow them and what to grow.
Grow, and looking at all the old varieties, which are the sort of heirloom varieties, which which are being preserved by the wonderful work the Seed Heritage Library is doing to preserve them for future prosperity, which is good news. So it should be a really insightful interview.
I'm looking forward to learning a bit more about seeds, because we sell a good few thousand packets of seeds each year, don't we? And it's always interesting to see which ones are the popular ones, and be nice to learn a bit more about the heritage varieties and sort of all about English seeds.
And also a little bit about what's the sort of some of the symbols on the seed packets mean. What does an F1 hybrid mean, and an open pollinated, so we get a better idea as gardeners how we should grow those varieties. So it's going to be an interesting show, mainly looking at vegetables, but we'll obviously touch on flowers as well.
Brilliant. Okay, well, that's in a couple of weeks' time. And like we said, you can still enter our competition for a chance to win the signed David Donnelly book.
Indeed, yes. And that's available if you go to our website at www.buckinghamgardencentre.co.uk. Just follow the podcast links and you'll go to the competition page, and please enter, and please tell your friends as well.
Definitely, please do. Well, thank you very much for today's episode, Chris.
No, thank you, Peter. Today's show was brought to you by Buckingham Garden Centre and Nurseries. The show was hosted by Chris Day and Peter Brown. The show was produced by Peter Brown. And our thanks to Chiltern Music Therapy for providing the music. Thanks for listening.
At Chiltern Music Therapy, we want everyone to know the difference that music can make in their lives. From parents and their premature babies in hospital to grandparents with dementia. We provide music therapy and community music services to people of all ages and needs across England. We work both digitally and in person in people's homes, care homes, schools, hospitals and hospices. Find out more at chilternmusictherapy.co.uk.